To get a better understanding of the e-liability accounting ID, let's first zoom in on what's wrong with the current greenhouse gas protocol. So when measuring and reporting about their greenhouse gas emissions, many standards require companies to report about their Scope 1, Scope 2 and Scope 3 emissions. In particular, it are these Scope 3 emissions that are the fatal flaw. With Scope 3, companies need to report emissions from upstream operations with their suppliers and from downstream activities with customers and end users. Estimating all those upstream and downstream emissions, especially for companies with long, complex and multi-country value chains, introduces high measurement error. Moreover, the Scope 3 protocol requires each company in a value chain to estimate and report greenhouse gas emissions from the same activity, which is not only inefficient, but generates duplication. Not surprisingly, some corporations ignore Scope 3 measurements entirely, but that limits any meaningful contribution to mitigating total emissions across their supply and distribution chains. It also skews responsibility to those suppliers with high emitting extraction, production, and distribution processes, while absolving their customers and consumers of accountability for using heavily polluting components. Corporations can fix this problem by introducing an e-liability accounting system. In a first step, environmental engineers can estimate the quantity of greenhouse gas emissions from a company's primary source activities, such as production and transportation equipment. Next, combining that science with cost accounting practices, firms can assign their total emissions to the output they have produced. For example, a mining company will assign its total emissions to the tons of coal or other minerals it has extracted during that period. Multiplying these individual emission rates with the total output will then create an e-liability, reflecting the environmental costs to society. When the mining company then transfers the coal to a shipping company, the shipping company assumes the e-liability from the mining company on its own e-accounting books. This e-liability will then further increase by the quantity of greenhouse gas emissions the shipping company requires to power its ship's engines to transport the required materials to their customers. And this process continues across the whole value chain until the consumer who buys the finished product receives a report on the quantity of greenhouse gas emissions produced through its manufacture and transportation. And finally, blockchain technology, starting with the first stage of production, can be used to accumulate and transfer e-liabilities from stage to stage, reducing accounting and auditing costs across the entire system. So blockchains are especially useful in recording Scope 1 emissions at each stage, so that subsequent e-liability transfers must always reconcile with the total Scope 1 number in a value chain. The e-liability accounting system offers several advantages. Most important, it eliminates the duplicative counting of emissions. It also reduces incentives for gaming and manipulation. A company cannot reduce its reported Scope 1 emissions simply by outsourcing production and then, as it is currently possible, ignoring its Scope 3 emissions on the grounds of high measurement error, a lack of access to distant suppliers and customers. In the e-liability system, any greenhouse gas emissions produced by an outsourced supplier will be transferred to the company upon purchase. What's more, a company can't benefit from understating the e-liability transfer to its customers, because its own end-of-period net e-liability would steadily escalate, suggesting that the company's products are more heavily polluting than customers will accept. Conversely, a company attempting to overstate e-liability transfers to downstream customers would meet with resistance from buyers that prefer to engage with less polluting suppliers. Finally, a company's end-of-period e-liability balance can be audited in much the same way than its financial asset and liability accounts are.